Welcome to the Inside Texas Football YouTube channel, powered by InsideTexas.com. This is the Reheat. I'm Joe Cook. We got RT Young. New thing we're trying here on this channel where we go over some of the big topics of the week, some of the big topics of yesteryear, and poke a little bit of fun at our rivals as well here in the Reheat. But if you're here, make sure you like this video and you subscribe to the channel. And of course, head to InsideTexas.com, sign up for just $1. Get a bunch of great analysis like we are bringing today. First off, we got a coaching addition to talk about, and that'll lead into a little bit of a conversation about how salaries have come a long way in 10 years. And then we'll go over something RT wrote. You got to judge the greats by who they played against. Finally, we'll go over Schadenfreude of the week. And if it's first time for this one, so if I butchered it, I'm sorry. We'll poke some fun at the rivals over a little bit east of Austin and talk about what's going on. Not great in their world, but the news of yesterday. It's spring break. The team's off. The coaches are hopefully off as well, or making a few phone calls. But they did add another coach to their ranks yesterday. That is Matt Moran. He'll be a special teams assistant. He seems to replace Jeff Crosby, who left Texas to take on a full-time on-field role at Appalachian State. And this is someone who, RT, you're hoping can work some magic with some of the special teams that and make some improvements with special teams, especially after a kind of disappointing season in that regard last year.
Yeah, absolutely. You felt like special teams was really a hallmark of a Steve Sarkisian team in his first 3 years in Austin. And in year 4, it truly became the biggest liability of the whole team, especially towards the end of the year when Bert Auburn became a kicker that you couldn't trust anymore on really routine kicks. Obviously, the Arizona State game was sort of a microcosm of the whole season special teams wise. You saw Silas Bolden return the early punt. Maurice Blackwell finally block a punt, but it gets called back for a penalty. And then Bert Auburn obviously really gets a kicker case of the yips. So I just wonder how much time with all of his other duties Jeff Banks is being able to devote to, looking after the kicker, looking after the punter, devising good schemes and weaknesses to block punts on other teams. So I think, adding Matt Moran is a nice addition. Hopefully he can get back to that hallmark, really good special teams play that we saw in the first couple years of Sark. And I think, maybe Bert Auburn rebuilding his confidence. We have the transfer Utah's Jack Baumeister, like your mispronunciation a second ago. I think that'll take me a while. But yeah, JMU was number 11 in block kicks, number 20 in block punts, number 16 in kickoff returns. So much better numbers than what we saw Texas have last year. So I'm excited about the addition. It can't hurt. And the coaching staffs are expanding in size, so you might as well cover all of your bases.
Yeah, it's you get somebody who is replacing a coach who worked mostly with specialists. That was Crosby's forte, and I think I've talked about this before. Sometimes I wonder, like, hey, go kick the ball better. How much can a coach like that do? But there is some fine points, just like there is with playing cornerback, playing receiver, that type of thing that they can help with. And you also get someone who I got told from a guy within the FBS coaching ranks. He knows how to, do the scheme stuff too. And he's got a real interesting background. He has a degree in philosophy from Bowdoin College, which is up there in Maine, got some graduate work done at Stanford. Like, that doesn't sound like someone who goes and is like, yeah, I'm going to be a special teams coach. That doesn't seem like the path that many take, but Matt Moran is doing that. And that kind of speaks to what our next topic is. Texas is a good place to be a football coach. And we've talked about that for a long time. I think Drew and I were talking about that a little bit on Monday. This is a destination job for a lot of different reasons. You get to get paid pretty nicely, being one of the big ones. And there's a lot of I'm about to put a graphic up that kind of underscores how much college football has changed in a decade. I wanted to go and get, what the media rights payouts differences was or differences were, and maybe even what the revenue differences were. But just this graph alone says a lot about how much has changed in college football, especially in the assistant coaching world within the past 10 years. And while Matt Moran's not up here, hey, he's going to be paid pretty well to live in Austin and help coach special teams. You don't leave, move around the country unless you have a good reason to. But first and foremost, let's take a look at that 2015 side of things. One big difference, there's only 9 assistants. Even so, you have Charlie Strong making $5.1 million as the head coach. And right now, I don't know off the top of my head, but I think that would be bottom 2 or bottom 3 in the current SEC. And then you compare it to Steve Sarkisian's more than double, 10.8.
Yeah, and that's obviously, due to performance. If Charlie Strong had succeeded here, or if Tom Herman had succeeded here, they would have eventually seen their numbers rise with the best of college football, because that's how Texas is expected to pay when Texas is performing. But I think in looking at this graph, I think a couple things really jump out. How many people on the current staff are ahead of Vance Bedford, who was the second highest paid coach on Charlie Strong's staff at the time. And now you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 assistants, it looks like, just from a quick read over, that are ahead of where Vance Bedford was 10 years ago. So you see how the profession has changed. You see how the money has obviously changed. But then another thing that really jumps out when you look at that 2015 staff is, besides Jeff Traylor and Jay Norvell, and obviously we know Vance Bedford from a Texas perspective, but really no names jump out. And I think if you looked at the first couple staffs of Tom Herman, that would be the case as well. And I think what you're seeing is a really good sign of health. The fact that I think if you look at the few first staffs of Steve Sarkisian's time in Austin, you're going to recognize a lot of those names 10 years from now. You're going to recognize Tashard Choice's name and guys like that who have gone on. Jeff Choate, obviously, is already a head coach. Guys who have really propelled their careers by spending time in Austin. And I think it's always funny, we spend a lot of time on the Inside Texas message board when certain fans get really up in arms about a coach potentially leaving, but that's going to continue to happen, and that's a good thing. There were a reason that in the doldrums of Texas football in those dark years from 2013 to 2018 specifically, maybe even 2020, 2021, why no coaches ever left for better jobs. Todd Orlando might have occasionally get mentioned for a head coaching job and everybody would freak out. But the reality is, coaches leaving and upgrading is a good thing, because it's going to allow more coaches to want to come to Austin, because they're going to see that, hey, coaching under Sark, coaching at the 40 acres is good for me. It's good for my career. So I think people should not worry when we lose coaches. The reason this thing is successful is because of that number at the top, that guy at the top who has $10.8 million salary. He's paid to put good people under him. And if this keeps churning, he'll continue to do that.
I'm trying to rack my brain. I know, Vance, you may be watching. Sorry to have aired your salary, but I know you knew as a public employee this was possible. I think Brick was he went to Missouri after Texas, and then I think he was most recently at Purdue. I think Brian Jean-Marie is at Michigan. Jay Norvell, obviously head coach of Colorado State. Don't know where Tommy Robinson is. I know Jeff Traylor's in San Antonio. I know Chris Vaughn's a scout with the Cowboys, I think, because remember he had that video of him drafting Deuce.
Deuce Vaughn's dad.
Sean Watson, trust me, Sean Watson's career did not get much better. He has not risen to great ranks. And I think Wickline is at Baylor or something like that. So like Brian Jean-Marie was a good addition on that staff. But you see some of the guys here, like you said, and trust me, it's because I live in that coaching carousel thread sometimes in the off season. And I'm like, I can recognize like, yeah, I know who the most random, I know information I don't need to know. But you see that, just from this group, Jeff Traylor and Jay Norvell are the only ones that rose to be a head coach. Charlie Strong went on and tried to be a head coach again, and it went poorly. And then you look over on the other side, and the big thing is, of course, just the dollar figures. And this doesn't even include Torrey Becton, who I think was above 800,000, and also Brandon Harris, who makes 600,000 as the general manager. So this proves that if you're at a place like Texas and you're performing, you're going to be rewarded. Or if you've got a good track record too, like the dean of DBU up there, Dwayne Aquina, you can also get rewarded just as well, because his salary is right around where Terry Joseph's would have been in the 2025 season. Anything else on the right side really stand out?
No, I mean, I don't think so. I think obviously, Pete Kwiatkowski, he's got a number that is similar to a lot of head coaches from when we were growing up, So he obviously has said multiple times he doesn't have necessarily aspirations to be a head coach. But I also think with that, you're going to have to keep him happy. And if he keeps putting defenses on the field like he's done the last 2 years, that number is going to continue to grow astronomically. So I think it'll be interesting, not only where are these head coaching salaries, but where are these top assistant coach salaries going as well.
One thing that really stood out to me is with AJ Milwee, I believe he was an offensive coordinator for whatever Bowden was still in coaching. I think the one that was at ULM, Tommy Bowden, maybe, or maybe I'm messing that up.
We played him a couple years ago.
Or Hawks football 2023.
Terry Bowden, yeah.
Terry Bowden. There we go. When Terry Bowden was at Akron, I believe AJ Milwee was his offensive coordinator. And we understand that when you're in college coaching, you dream to run your own program. And Milwee played Division II football in Alabama somewhere. He's been with Steve Sarkisian for the past, 6 years, I believe. So what would you rather do? Would you rather coach quarterbacks and not have to call plays, which I'm sure you would like to do at some point? Would you rather coach quarterbacks in Austin, Texas for $700,000, or have a salary of $620,000 like Joe Moorhead, head coach of Akron, does? And that's an accomplished guy. He's been around and has been a head coach before. Like that in and of itself, you're making more than more head coaches a lot around the country at a lot of different levels in football just by being an assistant at Texas. It's a great gig and a great reason why coaches decide to stick around within Austin until really they get a promotion, like we saw Blake Gideon take, or an opportunity in the NFL like we saw Terry Joseph take, or even going back, they finally get a head coaching job, because to sit in that chair like Stan Drayton was able to do, that's a big deal.
Well, something I was thinking about, Joe, and looking at this list, how many original names from Sark's first staff are still here? Banks, Flood, PK, Milwee, and obviously we just saw Gideon, Tashard Choice, and Terry Joseph leave in the last month, and those were original names. And I think it's a testament to Sark, a testament to the staff that he's built, that if you think about that original staff that he brought in 2021, everybody has upgraded their situation from when they left Texas. The only person I can think of who didn't would probably be Andre Coleman, who looks like he's on the Washington Commanders staff now, but he was also a holdover for one season from Tom Herman's staff. So everybody who Sark has brought in has upgraded their situation, whether it's in the form of a head coaching job like Jeff Choate, or people like Brennan Marion becoming coordinators. or heading back to the NFL in the case of Jashard Choice and others.
Before we keep going, got to show some love to one of our sponsors. First one is David McClellan.
I'm just going to say, guys, you probably need a fiduciary financial advisor, and I've got the guy for you. His name is David McClellan with Forum Financial. He works broadly and deeply with his clients as a financial life coach, and he should know something about coaching because he won several national championships as a swimmer for the University of Texas. He specializes in financial planning and has contributed numerous articles to Kiplinger on the topic of retirement tax bombs. So contact David today to be your fiduciary financial planner and schedule a 1-hour consultation to assess your financial situations. The free consultation is available, so just give him a call. The number is 312-933-8823. That's 312-933-8823. His email is also in the description below.
I know this video is coming out on Wednesday, but RT, you and I like celebrating Tuesdays. We call it Bad Take Tuesday, where we go to the Inside Texas Members Board and offer, bad takes. And last week I said Texas should claim all these unclaimed national titles. I think 1914, 41, 77, call themselves nine-time national champions instead of 4-time national champions. Yesterday, you wrote something a little bit inspired by Bill Simmons, saying that, when you're looking at some of the greats and in terms of Texas football, you mentioned someone like Tommy Nobis. Don't judge whether Tommy Nobis would have been able to do anything against Kelvin Banks, but rather judge Tommy Nobis by being a wrecking ball from 1963 to 1965.
Yeah, I was inspired by Bill Simmons and Ryan Russillo. Obviously, I've been a loyal Simmons stan for 20-something years, but they were talking about Bill Russell and if he would translate to the modern NBA. And there's so many factors you have to consider with that. Shoes, nutrition. Does he get a much better development, than he would have in 2025 from back in the day? But I just think a lot of those conversations are silly because I think the way that you judge greatness is by when a player played and how much better they were than their peers. So I think if you look at somebody like Tommy Nobis, who started both ways on a national championship team on offensive line and at linebacker, and he was truly one of the greatest players of his era. And his peers said that, other coaches said that. You look at his teammate, Duke Carlisle, who started at quarterback and started at defensive back and had multiple game-winning interceptions as a defender. And, so I think that's a much more interesting way to judge people, rather than like, oh, well, I don't know if Tommy Nobis would have had the foot speed to compete in the modern Big 12 against an Art Briles passing attack. I think, one, we can't do those comparisons by time travel. It's like when people say, oh, what would the founding fathers say about America today? Well, the founding fathers would probably go and hide under a tree when they saw a helicopter fly overhead because they would be scared to death. So, a lot of those comparisons aren't apt for today. So I think that's what it was inspired by. But I obviously included a little bit of irony in the post too, because then I included some guys who I wish I would have seen in more modern eras, like AJ Abrams on the basketball side, chunking it up from three in a era that allowed for more 3-point shooting and more space. Or then even on the offensive side in football, somebody like Marquise Goodwin, who what he could have done in an era where not every receiver was expected to look like Roy Williams or Calvin Johnson. And you could get away with a little bit more body types like Marquise or Xavier Worthy. So I contradicted myself in the post, but yeah, it's Bad Take Tuesday. What do you expect?
I think the one about Marquise is very, very important because, heck, we even saw a head coach, with Tom Herman and how he operated. He would march out a wide receiver core that was all 6'3" or taller. You had one that had Colin Johnson, who Colin Johnson's a little different. When you're 6'6" and you can move like you're 6'3", like that's special. And you take that, and Colin Johnson was a fantastic college football receiver. Little Jordan Humphrey, 6'3.5" or so, but had movement skills different. And then John Burt He didn't have great hands, but he had All-American track speed. And so you're starting these 6, and eventually Devin Duvernay, who is a little bit more closer to what Texas has shifted to under Sarkisian, he was in there. But that was a coach that didn't really value we don't need this guy if he's not 6'1" and 190 pounds right away. Even someone like Tajay Johnson, if he could have stayed on the field, he wouldn't have been a gadget guy. He would have been playing wide receiver in this Sarkisian offense. But teams and offensive minds didn't trust 5'9", 180-pound guys to be able to go over the middle. And so as a result, they just didn't know what to do with him. Well, he's not a running back. Well, he's a gadget guy. And now you can see that they're able to use that. Marquise would have fit in perfect. And that's why Marquise I think he's still bouncing around NFL teams as a result because of that shift in thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, you even see guys who get in the NFL, like Tavon Austin, who Tavon Austin has to have a Tavon Austin package, where if he was coming into the NFL now and it's only been 10 years, his teammate from West Virginia, Geno Smith, just got a new contract and is still in the NFL. I think obviously a Tavon Austin is just a feature of your offense. They're not a guy who needs a special package, etc. But I think also that's doing exactly what I said you shouldn't do on the bad take. You got to judge people by their eras. And I think that it's interesting too when you see somebody in a specific era like that, like Tavon Austin, or, I probably think of another examples if I had been more prepared, but somebody who breaks the mold of the era that they're playing in. So you look at way back in the day in Longhorn history, another guy I mentioned in the post, but Bobby Lane, could he have translated into a modern spread attack? Well, Bobby Lane's passing numbers from the 1940s when they didn't throw the ball very much are, mind-boggling. And so I think that it's pretty interesting also judging guys by what were the trends of their eras and did they break those molds? And guys like Bobby Lane definitely did that.
Do you think Eric Metcalf stays at running back in modern football?
I don't know. I think he's a guy who obviously, people who look like him are definitely not often the feature backs of, SEC teams anymore. Even though we have gotten a little bit away from not everybody has to look like Leonard Fournette, but then you look at the NFL and you look at a lot of guys who are really succeeding at running back in the last few years, like Alvin Kamara and people like that. And you're like, sure, Eric Metcalf could easily compete in that sort of NFL. It's just, I think it's all about context and about your system and how well you're developed and you groomed along the way.
We saw Jaden Blue do pretty well, and he's heading to the NFL. And I'm sure that you can look at that and see that they're pretty similar. But yeah, going back to the main thing that you talked about, judging by their played against, you can't think that you could slide number 11 over and then put number 60 in the middle, and it's going to be the exact same when you're thinking about Longhorn defenses. You got to judge by the greats. And I mean, baseball, this is an eternal argument. It's like, oh, Babe Ruth, you hear a lot of the criticisms of the Yankees rings and what Babe Ruth was able to do, before the color barrier was broken and stuff like that. And while it's true, Babe Ruth was still hitting bombs against everybody that they played. Would he survive in modern baseball? Probably not. But would he still be, is he still one of the best ever because he was head and shoulders above everybody else in his era? Absolutely. Before we keep on going, got a little bit of fun stuff to finish with, but we got to hear some love, give some love to our other sponsor, that is Laura Baker.
Hi, I want to tell you about Laura Baker. If you're looking for a new home in the 512 or even at this point, let's face it, 737 area code, there's only one number to call. That's Laura Baker at 512-784-0505. As a member of the elite Andy Allen team with Keller Williams, Laura has helped Longhorns find the home of their dreams in Central Texas. Just ask our resident sex symbol, Ian Boyd, who moved all the way from Michigan to Texas with Laura's help. Laura can help you find what you're looking for in the 512, the 737, or even parts of the 254 and the 210. Just, give her a call at 512-784-0505. Her email is in the description as well as the rest of her contact details. She's a friend. Give her a call.
All right, I got to throw this one to you to pronounce it one more time because I just can't do it.
This is the Schadenfreude of the week, where we poke fun at someone else and we take joy at the expense of others. It is a German word, which I think has its most value in sports fandom and really taking pleasure at the pain of your rivals. So, Joe, I thought for our first Schadenfreude of the week, we would look east at our friends in College Station.
To provide a good example, we could have looked north last week when we were thinking about doing this last week with Drake Stoops, who some people on a certain app said was better than Xavier Worthy. It maybe took a little bit too much motivation for Drake Stoops. He's getting hit with a PED suspension. He's not better than Xavier Worthy. Hope that he's fine, but I hope the 2-game suspension was worth the time. But this time we got to look towards a program who, oddly enough, had a change in baseball coach even after making like the national championship and almost winning it. You don't hear about that very often, and they thought that things were still going to be rolling the same, but for some reason they've fallen from number one.
Yeah, it's strange, and the Aggies are who we're speaking of, and they are the first team to ever start the season number one, and then at this point in the season already be unranked. That comes after their sweep at the hands of Alabama, I believe, on the first weekend of SEC play. So it is tough times in College Station on the baseball front. Obviously, it's baseball, so you probably should slow down your victory lap, Longhorn fans, a little bit because things can change. Obviously, this comes a night after the Longhorns lost a midweek game to UTSA in the 12th inning, which I stayed up for. And the Longhorns have a big matchup against number one LSU this weekend. But, yeah, it is pretty juicy. Just after hearing all the things this summer of Schloss wasn't the reason for the Aggies' success and how much they pounded their chest that they retained all their players, which really called back to the Jimbo Fisher era and their just absolute infatuation with that number one recruiting class, which just became the millstone around their neck in so many ways. But I think that obviously Michael Early, if we pull up those assistant salaries, he was making what he was making last year for a reason. There is a reason that Texas A&M offered the job to guys like Nolan Kane before they offered Michael Early first. Know that for a fact. And it's tough times. Obviously, last week they'll probably go farther than the Longhorns in March Madness, but the Longhorns got that double overtime victory in the SEC tournament as well.
I saw it was somebody made this picture or a meme. It's like, I want the baseball team to have this energy. And there's that clip of Texas A&M walking out of the tunnel. It's like, if you're not wearing my colors, F you, or something like that. Great clip. I mean, if you're an Aggie fan, but somebody had the comment like, oh, what, you want them to collapse at the end of the season instead of the beginning or something like that. So it's always fun to poke fun over at our friends just east of Austin. We'll be able to do this across, not just rivalries, but around the country. I think we're going to have plenty in the off season. Some coach is going to put their foot in their mouth. Some coach is going to put 2 feet in their mouth. I don't want to limit it to just that. Or some administrator is going to say something that just doesn't end up being good for their program.
And there's times, in the written version of the Reheat, which I write all season in football, it'll occasionally make its appearance in basketball or baseball like it did last week. But there are times where you have to point the Schadenfreude inward, like last year when we, had the biggest weekend ever in Austin and brought out Joe Rogan and everybody for Texas and Georgia, and then lost by 15 at home. So there's really times where you have to have some self-awareness and say, I can't laugh at anybody else but myself right now. That's part of fandom.
We're going to be doing a lot of laughing, I feel like, at those people out east for a little while longer. So, all right. It's a good first edition of the Reheat. We have many more to come. But if you're on this channel already, go ahead and give us a like. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We'll be bringing this every Wednesday to you. And as we get more and more football to talk about, aside from just a special teams assistant, we're going to have a lot more to bring to you. And of course, like I said, somebody's always putting their foot in their mouth. It's going to be fun to be able to poke fun. And heck, it may be big enough for us to lead off some shows at some point. So make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. And of course, head to InsideTexas.com, and RT, they got to head to LonghornAlphabet.com as well.
Brush up on your history. Get a great children's book to bond with you and your kiddos over about the Longhorns. And you can now get it locally in Austin at Sue Patrick or at Longhorn Fashions if you don't want to wait for the Amazon release on April 8th, or pay for shipping. Go get it locally in more stores in Austin, and hopefully Dallas and Houston, other cities in Texas will come too. So check out LonghornAlphabet.com.
Absolutely. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on the Inside Texas Football YouTube channel, powered by InsideTexas.com.